for successfully conveying to the group how easily I get bored and how much school I like to participate in. So this is my favorite thing to do, however, which is conveying the latest research in exercise and brain health. And I look forward to today's presentation. So I will share my screen now. Allison, can you see my screen? And I assume everyone else is able to as well. Very good. I can see it. So thank you for the comprehensive introduction, and I love working with Cognitive Care Solutions. They're an excellent partner of ours. I'm going to start off by discussing what the problem is, which is probably why you all are interested, which is the increasing prevalence of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias worldwide. And these statistics are from 2020, I believe. And so by the year 2050, it's projected that worldwide, there will be over 106 million cases of Alzheimer's disease. And that is just one form of dementia. Dementia is an umbrella term that relates to cognitive impairment severe enough to interfere with activities of daily living. And whether you have cognitive impairment or not, your main concern is probably maintenance of functional independence. And that is both physical functional independence, social, and cognitive functional independence. So I don't think I need to tell any of you that we have a big problem when it comes to cognitive impairment globally. And these statistics are not including conditions such as Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, stroke, traumatic brain injury, and mental health issues. So I think we all understand and are aware of the global problem of cognitive impairment, and that we need to find things to stop, slow, or prevent these conditions. You might be wondering, well, what if I already have a condition like this, whether it's a neurological condition like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease at various stages or mild cognitive impairment? And the answer is it depends regarding exercise, but it is always able to help, even if it's not able to help with brain health. It can help with mood, it can help with physical functioning and quality of life at any stage of life. So I'm going to ruin my ending by saying it's never too late to improve something. It just depends by how much and what domain that thing is. One thing I like to talk about in terms of offsetting cognitive decline, preventing or slowing it, is this idea of cognitive reserve. And cognitive reserve is actually a theoretical concept that discusses how the brain can actually improve its theoretical or metaphorical gas tank. And so the more full this gas tank is, the more things it has, the longer you can extend your trajectory of cognition and brain health. And so this thing in the middle that we call cognitive reserve, what goes into that? Well, the first thing that goes into it, and probably the biggest thing as research is starting to show, is what's called modifiable health factors. These things include exercise, which is the topic of today's exercise, or today's presentation, sleep, nutrition, stress management, and cognitive stimulation. Those are all modifiable health factors that we can modify, which is why they're called modifiable, at any point in life that can change how our brain responds. Then there's the level of education. And while educational level does matter, in fact, research is starting to show that the incidence of Alzheimer's disease is going down over time, perhaps because of increased access to education, a better understanding in public health regarding lifestyle and the importance therein of preventing cognitive decline with lifestyle. But education does matter, but it doesn't mean just because you have a PhD that you will not get dementia or experience cognitive decline. In fact, many of the people we work with have higher levels of education. And perhaps one of the reasons educational level matters is because of the novel, constant learning involved in that. And so even if you've achieved a degree of any sorts, we always encourage the learning process for various reasons we'll describe later. Social support is also important. So you may have heard of the negative impacts of social isolation and how important that is to combat as well as prevent. I think all of us, socially isolated or not, regardless of age or diagnosis, have experienced that during the pandemic, a change in our social environment can have an effect on our cognitive and mental health. Speaking of mental health, what's shown in the upper right on this chart, positive affect. And what that means is a positive mood state. In other words, good mental health is also good for brain health. We have stimulating activities and novel experiences. This includes stimulating your brain through a variety of different activities, whether it's art, music, socialization, board games, whatever it might be, but also novel experiences, doing things that are new, taking on a new hobby, going to a new place. All of these things can be stimulating for the brain and have been found to be helpful for cognitive reserve. Lastly, we have cognitive training, whether that's sort of manualized pencil and paper cognitive training that you do through a group like Cognitive Care Solutions, or there are brain games that you might play on AARP's Staying Sharp program, or downloading an app called Brain HQ. And so there's a variety of ways to get these different aspects of our lifestyle into our lifestyle so that we can have the highest possible cognitive reserve. And individuals that have a higher cognitive reserve do tend to offset or prevent cognitive decline, or at least slow it down more than individuals with a lower cognitive reserve. So the presentation today is more about exercise, as exercise has been found to be one of the most powerful things for your brain health and your mental health and your physical health. And my perspective on exercise is how can we use exercise as a medium to have more socialization, such as a group exercise class, or working with a personal trainer, or working with a physical therapist? How can we use exercise that encourages stimulating and novel activities, like learning a new type of exercise, such as a new type of dance, or Tai Chi, or ping pong? And then how can we engage in cognitive training while we're exercising? And what I mean by that, usually, there's some cool research that we're doing where we combine brain games with exercise. But for most of the population here, I would say it's activities like dance, sports, some forms of martial arts, and mind-body exercises like Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, and Pilates that are stimulating. And you're not pedaling on the bike, staring at the wall, watching the paint dry. You're actually stimulating your brain while you're moving. And those types of exercises have been found to theoretically be more beneficial for cognition. So let's talk about all the different ways that exercise can impact the brain. I know some of these slides are complicated, but verbally I'll simplify them for you. So exercise can affect the brain at multiple levels. The three levels it can affect is the behavioral level, which is the level that we really care about because it involves cognition and mood. Those are the things that we feel immediately and over time. It can affect things at the micro level. This is the level where it's kind of interesting, but we're not going to feel it. We're not going to feel a neuron branching out. We're not going to feel the release of a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. But at this micro level, if we were to put the brain under a microscope, we would see things like increased blood flow, the release of hormones that are beneficial, the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and things like that. We'd see things like BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, being released, which has been called miracle growth for the brain by some scientists. And so we also see neurons, which are brain cells, in some areas of the brain, like the hippocampus, the memory center, may be increase in number. This is sort of being debated. That's called neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons, but also the branching out of neurons. That's called synaptogenesis, and they start to connect together a little bit more efficiently over time. The macro level is something that can be measured through a neurology practice, through things like brain scans, where we can see a change in the size or the activity, or also known as function, of the brain as a whole. So that could be the size of your hippocampus got bigger with exercise after 6 to 12 months of doing it, or that could be your frontal lobe works better because you're doing a dance class and you can make decisions quickly and efficiently. And so those can be measured in research studies and in clinical settings. But most of the time, when we exercise, we're going to feel right away, it's called the short-term or acute benefits, an improvement in our cognition or mood. We feel a little sharper, we feel a little bit more awake, or we feel an improvement in our mood state. Over time, when we repeat that, because those things don't last beyond 12 to 24 hours, they go away, then we have to do exercise again to get those benefits again. And so the way we get that more regularly and more permanently, and I don't want to say permanently, but more chronically, is we do it over a period of weeks and months. So the average amount of exercise intervention for brain health is about 3 to 6 months on average. This depends how often you're doing it, how long you're doing it for, what kind of exercise. We're going to talk about all that later. But this is just to show you that exercise affects the brain at multiple levels, and it's more complex than just blood flow. So it's quite amazing, and this is why pharmaceutical companies are probably quite jealous of exercise, that they can't replicate it in a pill because it's so complex. This is another complicated chart, but this is just showing the short-term benefits of exercise. So if you're going to see the top of the screen here, you're going to see 15 minutes, 30 minutes, all the way to 24 hours. That's how long each neurobiological event lasts for underneath it. And so let me break this down for you in a way that's easy to understand. Let's say we did 30 minutes of exercise on the exercise bike, or we went for a nice vigorous walk.
I'm sorry, we can't see the top of the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. How about now? Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know. So let's say we did 60 or 30 minutes of exercise, and then we stop. For up to 15 minutes after that exercise, there's more blood flow in the front of our brains called the prefrontal cortex. That's responsible for higher order cognitive functions. For up to about 60 minutes to about 2 hours, there's an upregulation in all these neurotransmitters. So a lot of people ask me, what neurotransmitters are released as the result of exercise? It does depend on the intensity and the duration and what kind of exercise it is, but the answer is usually a whole bunch of them, if not all of them. So GABA, glutamate, lactate, norepinephrine, dopamine, cortisol, serotonin, you probably recognize the names of these neurotransmitters, and they're all released because exercise is an excitatory activity for the nervous system in which the brain is a part. If you look at the bottom, you're going to see these brain waves, delta waves, theta waves, alpha waves, beta waves, and they all increase because, once again, exercise is an excitatory activity. And that's probably why you feel awake and alert, is because the brain waves speed up. For up to an hour after exercise, we release that brain-derived neurotrophic factor I spoke about earlier. And for up to 2 hours, you will feel sharper cognitively. It does depend on the other factors I mentioned, but usually people feel sharp for up to 2 hours. So if you got something cognitively demanding coming up in 2 hours, you might do just a little bit of exercise, maybe even just 10 minutes to get brain blood flow going, which is what I probably should have done to improve this presentation, although I was working. So for up to 3 hours, you would do something that was more, if you did exercise, you would have a really positive effect on stress reduction. That is, you are less stressed for up to 3 hours. And for up to 24 hours, just one time exercising, you have improvements in mood. Now, you might be thinking, this isn't how I experience exercise every time. And that's because every form and mode and type of exercise is different, and everyone's brains are different. Everyone's neurochemistry is different. So you might only get some of these benefits. You might have some of these benefits and not feel them. But this is what's been found across multiple studies. We're talking at least 40 different research studies showing the short-term benefits of exercise. Once again, these things kind of dissipate over time, and we need to repeat it again and again and again to make those changes more chronic. Okay, so now let's talk about the different types of exercise. There's physical training and motor training. On the left-hand side, aerobic exercise and strength exercise comprise the category of physical training. And this improves the brain through what's called metabolic demands. We're releasing those growth factors and blood flow like BDNF and other things that cross into the blood-brain barrier from the muscle and the heart, and it's telling the brain to do good things. It's increasing metabolism. It's improving blood sugar regulation and blood pressure. An example could be swimming, walking, jogging, hiking, cycling, treadmill, elliptical, you name it, anything that's physically demanding. On the right side, we have what's called motor training. You may have not heard of motor training, but motor training, also called neuromotor training, incorporates balance and coordination, and it improves the brain through things like neuromuscular demands. Neuromuscular demands are where the brain and the body are kind of working together. So the example given here is Tai Chi, but that could be yoga, and that could be a variety of other things. When we combine specific skills that have metabolic demands and they have neuromuscular demands, that's called skill training. And skill training includes things like tennis, ping pong, racquetball, dance, other sports, more metabolically demanding martial arts like boxing. And so these types of skills are both metabolically demanding and neuromuscularly demanding at the same time. Now, it doesn't mean that's the best form of exercise, but it does offer this simultaneous benefit. And just like we want carbs, fats, and proteins in our diet, we also want physical training, motor training, and skill training. And we're going to break that down later. I'm going to use some synonyms and just kind of make this easier from a terminology standpoint. The other thing that combines brain and body training at the same time is something called dual tasking. I typically do not recommend that individuals try dual tasking on their own. And I especially don't recommend you do the example given here, which is counting backwards while walking. And one of the reasons I don't recommend it is because that's actually a test to assess dual task ability. And plus, 99% of the population doesn't like counting backwards by sevens anyway. So I recommend you don't do that one. And dual tasking also can have a fall risk. So if you distract yourself too much during a movement like walking, it could actually lead to a fall. So I only recommend dual tasking with the supervision of a certified personal trainer in this area or a physical therapist that's also qualified to help you with that. Rather, I encourage participation in activities that naturalistically include dual tasking, like the skill training we're talking about. We're going to skip that slide. It's a little complicated. So let's go over our exercise recommendations for brain health. Hopefully I've sold you enough that exercise is good for the brain, and probably prior to coming to this presentation, you already knew that exercise was good for the brain. But the problem most people have is actually doing the thing, in this case, exercise. So you can have the knowledge of health and wellness. For example, we all know that eating vegetables is a good thing, but common knowledge doesn't equal common practice, meaning just because we have the information does not necessarily mean we'll change our behavior. So one thing I found that's helpful to change our behavior is actually just knowing the options and knowing how to create a plan and the different ways we can do that till your brain sort of breaks it down in an organized manner that says, you know what, I can do this, or I didn't know I had all those options. I thought I could only do it this way. So here are the main exercise recommendations for brain health. These are broad, sweeping recommendations with average numbers of days per week. And if you're paying attention, you'll find that, yes, there are not 9 days in a week, but everything here is 2 to 3 days a week. I'll break that down a little bit more later. The first one's cardiovascular exercise, and the second one is resistance training. You may remember that both of those comprise the area of physical training. But cardiovascular exercise is good for the heart, while resistance training is good for the muscles. Both are considered organs that, when taken care of and when are healthy, really benefit the brain. So cardiovascular exercise is defined as anything that gets your heart rate up above resting levels. It's not the same thing as physical activity, which is unstructured, like walking a few extra steps or going up the stairs. That is good for you, but that's not structured aerobic exercise. And the general recommendation is to do this about 2 to 3 days a week. Then we have resistance training. Resistance training can include body weight exercise as done in fitness classes or Pilates, but usually it involves overcoming an external weight or load of some kind, whether those are bands or dumbbells, because it stimulates the skeletal muscle. It tells them to work better, maybe even to grow or maintain their size. And it also releases hormones that cross into the blood-brain barrier that tell the brain to grow, survive, and do good things. This is also recommended 2 to 3 days a week. The last category is skill-based exercise. This could be mind-body exercise like Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, or Pilates, but it could also be something that's more metabolically demanding, like a racket sport, a type of dance, or a type of martial art. Also recommended 2 to 3 days a week. Now, you might be thinking how to break this down early or more specifically for you and how to kind of organize it. We're going to get into some examples of a weekly brain healthy exercise program. And you might be thinking, well, what if I do resistance training that gets my heart rate up? Does that count for my day of cardiovascular exercise? And the answer is yes. And so that's how we can check off multiple boxes with one form of exercise, with one session of exercise. If I play tennis or ping pong and that gets my heart rate up, is that good for cardiovascular exercise? Does that count? The answer is yes. And so there's ways to kind of save a lot more time and effort while making this not as complex by hitting multiple birds with less stones. I'm a fan of birds. It's a familiar metaphor. Here we have some examples of cardiovascular exercise. At the top are non-machine dependent, more common forms. Upper left could be, walking, jogging, hiking, whatever that ambulatory exercise is. We have fitness classes, which could be done online, in person, or in a group setting. And we have things like swimming or pool exercise. At the bottom, we have bikes, ellipticals, and treadmills. And so I like to say, pick the one that you're most likely to do. If this was a restaurant and these 6 things were on the menu, you may not like any of them, but which one would you like the most out of the ones that we have here? Is there something that's not listed that you could think of that you would like to do? Is there something that you used to do that you're no longer doing and that you could safely reactivate into your life? Or is there something you've always wanted to try that you haven't done yet that can get your heart rate up? And so these are questions I like to ask. And if none of those questions really serve you, the question could be, well, why don't we just try one and see how you like it? So not many people have done an exercise class, but you might go to silversneakers.com, try it and see that you like it. You never know. The next form here is resistance training. And while I said that body weight does count, we're really talking about overcoming external loads, which includes a weight of some kind. And so at the top, we have bands, which are very common to use at home or in a physical therapy clinic or a gym. We have machines, which really allow you to increase the weight while reducing range of motion and working within a safe range of motion. These can be very helpful, especially if it's self-administered at a gym. And then we have dumbbells. There's also many other forms of resistance training. And the ones at the bottom, I would really just recommend doing if you have supervision. These are things that are more degrees of freedom, and therefore they can be very functional, but also possess a higher injury risk. And this is where the supervision of a fitness professional or a physical therapist is highly recommended. That includes medicine balls, kettlebells, and yes, even barbells. Barbells, if learned how to be used appropriately, can have a nice amount of load. It can load the skeleton and load the muscle in a way that gets a big return on your time investment. It's just difficult to use and requires a lot of skill development, and it is potentially more injurious, not enjoyment, but injury prone. So you do need the consultation of a fitness professional to help you learn that. And all of these things are helpful for developing bone mass, maintaining skeletal muscle, and also improving brain health. The last category is skill-based exercise. At the top, we have our mind-body exercise modalities. And at the bottom, we have our more metabolically demanding skill-based activities. So at the top, we have Tai Chi, we have Pilates, which could be reformer Pilates or mat Pilates, and we have yoga. And so there's also Qigong and many different forms of yoga, many different forms of Pilates. All of them are mind-body exercises and have been researched to benefit cognition, balance, brain health, and even blood pressure. On the bottom, we have racket sports. That could be tennis, racquetball, my favorite being ping pong. We have dance, and then we have martial arts like boxing. When I said martial arts, you might be thinking, what, karate classes or jujitsu? You can't imagine yourself doing that. But boxing classes, especially for those with Parkinson's disease, are increasingly popular, fun, and can be very helpful. All of these can increase brain health. Some have more research than others. For example, Tai Chi has a lot of research because it's been around for so long. Boxing, on the other hand, doesn't really have a lot of research. However, there is research showing that any open skill exercise, an open skill is something that has some unpredictability to it. So if I'm playing ping pong with a buddy, I can't predict where that ball is always going to go. If I'm dancing with a partner with an unmemorized routine, I don't know what's going to happen. So I have to use my brain to adapt to the circumstance, and it's more cognitively demanding. Those types of skills, open skills, because they're open, anything could happen within them, have been shown to improve certain cognitive functions. Doesn't mean that the others are bad, but rather the aerobic resistance and skill all kind of offer something unique, and we kind of want a combination of all of them. So let's talk about the minimum recommendations for brain health. If exercise is medicine, what is the dosage? So the physical activity guidelines for Americans says that you want about 150 to 300 minutes of exercise per week. Now, I've probably met one person in doing this for the past decade that actually counts minutes per week of exercise. What that really means, it's 2.5 to 5 hours. So it could be 30 minutes a day, Monday through Friday, or 1 hour a day, Monday through Friday, just to give you an example. And that is moderate to vigorous. So I like to use a 1 out of 10 scale. It's called the rate of perceived exertion, which is how much do you perceive you're exercising, how intensively. And what research shows is that if 10 is the most and 1 is the least, a 4 to a 6 out of 10, unless you're just completely biased and inaccurate about your effort, is a moderate intensity. A 6 to an 8 out of 10 is a vigorous intensity. So most people who I talk to, if you're already walking, for instance, and you would rank that at about a 3 out of 10 on that RPE scale. And I said, what would it take to get you to go to a 4 safely? And you just say walking up a hill or walking a little bit faster safely, you're already at moderate. And so a lot of people are kind of almost there in terms of reaching that moderate level versus the low intensity. Low intensity exercise does have brain benefits, but we really want to get to those moderate intensities at the very least. Not for every form of exercise, but for things like Tai Chi and yoga, you won't get to moderate, but it's still good for your brain. But we usually want those metabolic benefits that we were talking about. When we add different types of exercise, like motor training or strength training, or we do it for more minutes, there does seem to be additional physical and brain health benefits. Also, research shows that a multi-domain exercise program slows the progression of cognitive decline more than single shorter modality programs. And what that means is when you do more than one type of exercise, you're getting a variety of benefits. Therefore, you're more likely to prevent cognitive decline because you're getting a variety of those benefits, kind of like eating multiple food groups, if you will. There was also a big review of research showing it took about 52 hours of exercise to achieve significant benefits in executive functions, those higher order level cognitive functions, and processing speed in older adults, including those with cognitive impairment, including dementia. And it didn't matter what kind of exercise it was. So that kind of contradicts what I'm saying. You want a variety, you want skill, you want aerobic, you want resistance. But this was a big review study and didn't get those very specific details that I'm giving you. However, it takes about 52 hours, and you might ask 52 hours over what time. So if you're doing 5 hours a week, you're going to get to that 52 hours faster than if you're doing 2 times a week. If you're doing 2 hours a week of exercise, it might take you 8 to 12 months to hit 52 hours. If you're doing 5 hours a week of exercise, you could hit that in 3 to 6 months. Now, if you hit those 52 hours, it doesn't mean you stop. Quite the opposite, in fact. That's just what this dose response seems to be for cognitive improvements in exercise. Interestingly, it also takes about 50 hours of balance training to significantly improve balance. And it doesn't mean you can't improve or feel improvements in cognition before that. This is just a broad sweeping review of all the research. So let's talk about a sample exercise program. I've talked enough about the science, I've talked enough about the different categories, but let's talk about a sample beginner exercise program. I know this has 4 days, but let's just pretend it's 3 days. Let's just focus on the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You're coming to me, I'm your brain health coach. You said, Ryan, I'm doing it, I'm interested. I'm not exercising currently except walking every day. I'm ready to have a brain healthy exercise program. Where should I start? I'll give you 3 days a week, go. So what I'd say is that Monday and Friday, you might go to the gym. If you can't go to the gym or don't want to, maybe we do this at home and a different version of it. And let's say we get on the exercise bike, and it can be any form of exercise. It could be a fast walk, elliptical, treadmill. I don't care, as long as it's safe and enjoyable for you. You get on the exercise bike for 30 minutes. That could be interval training, that could be continuous, whatever you want that to be, as long as it's at least a moderate intensity. Here it says 6 to 8 out of 10. Let's just say 4 to 8 out of 10. Then for 30 minutes, you go on the weight machines and you go in a circuit. You do 2 sets of 10 repetitions of each exercise, and you do maybe 7 machines for 30 minutes. That's 1 hour total at the gym. That could be the YMCA or a participating Silver Sneakers location. You are done. You've done your aerobics, you've done your resistance, and then you repeat it again on Friday. You have a couple days in between to kind of rest up from any potential delayed onset muscle soreness you might have. Monday and Friday, you're good. You've done your aerobic and resistance. But let's say you want to go back to the gym, or you have an online class and it's a Zumba class, and you want to take a dance class. You've heard dance is so good for the brain. It is motor, and it is skill learning, and it's aerobic, and it's good for balance, and it's good for socialization. What could be better? So you're going to do that for 60 minutes. Could be moderate to vigorous. Maybe it's a little bit slower, more moderate when you're learning the movements, and maybe it's more vigorous when you're stringing them all together. But just Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 60 minutes each section, that's 180 minutes of exercise. You're 30 minutes over that 150 minimum. We have at least a moderate intensity. You're doing aerobic, resistance, and skill. So that's an example of how easy this can be. On Saturday, let's say you wanted to go walking for an hour with a friend or your significant other. Perfect. That's additional benefits, additional points for you there. Now, let's say you want to go extra. You're willing to exercise 7 days a week. You want to go every day. You're going to do 1 hour or 30 minutes of something. Let me break this down. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, this is an advanced exercise program because of its frequency, how often we're doing it. Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, we are going to go to the gym. And at the gym, we're going to do the same 60-minute routine. 20 minutes of aerobic exercise, shown here as AT, aerobic training. 20 minutes of resistance training, shown here as RT, or weight training. And 20 minutes of balance. That's 60 minutes total and an average of moderate intensity. And we're going to do that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesday and Saturday, we're going to do Tai Chi. And that could be at home, online, in a group, whatever you want to do on your own. And then Thursday and Sunday, we're doing a skill-based dance. Let's say it's line dancing or salsa dancing. And so the dance is the more metabolically demanding skill-based activity. The Tai Chi is the more calm mind-body skill-based activity. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're doing our aerobic and our resistance and our balance exercise. Now, if you wanted to, you could get rid of the balance because you're doing that in the dance and the Tai Chi and do 30 minutes aerobic, 30 minutes resistance. This is not something I'm recommending for you. This is just to give you an idea of how we might be able to structure our exercise program based on your desired days per week, so on and so forth. So there's several things to consider when designing an exercise program or working with a professional, like a fitness professional or a physical therapist or your doctor when designing this. You want to know how many days a week you're ready to do exercise. Is it 3, like the first one I showed you, or is it 7? That's called frequency. The next one's duration. Can you spare 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour? It's not that longer is better, but you want to know how long you're able to do this for, what you want to do this for. If it's 30 minutes, you're probably going to have to do more frequency because it's less duration. If it's 60 minutes, you can probably get away with less frequency. And then what's the intensity? If it's a Tai Chi class, that's great. It's not supposed to be intense. But you do still have to check off that moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise that you're cleared for by your doctor and getting that intensity. But also, are you learning a skill? Is there something new that you're learning here? Is it novel to you? It doesn't need to be a new form of exercise every time, but let's say you're taking a dance class. Are you learning a new routine every couple of weeks? If you're playing ping pong, are you learning how to put spin on it and playing a new opponent? If you're doing Tai Chi, are you learning some new choreography, some more complex movement? Or are you switching after doing yoga for 10 years over to Tai Chi? And so there can be novelty within what you're doing or a completely different type of exercise altogether. And then environment. This is mostly about preference, but do you want to be in a group? Do you want to be on your own? Do you want to be in the gym or do you want to be online? And so do you want to be outside, inside? These are all things to consider. There's no one that's best for anything for anybody, but these are the variables you want to consider. Now that I hope you understand a lot more about exercise and physical activity for your brain, and hopefully you're ready to start some sort of program, it's important to keep in mind that while exercise is one of the most important things for your brain health, it's not the most important thing for your brain health, especially in isolation. That includes sleep, diet, stress management, medication management, prevention or management of comorbidities. So if you have diabetes or a neurological condition, you're managing that as well. You're stimulating your brain, and you have social support. All the things that we reviewed over our cognitive reserve slide. This is why it's so important to work with your doctor, work with a group like Cognitive Care Solutions, health coaches, nutritionists, physical therapists, personal trainers. It can be overwhelming, but it could also be exciting in that you get to explore each of these areas and really construct your new lifestyle based on your updated goals, which might be associated with brain health. And yes, this can be overwhelming, but at the same time, if you take it step by step and you're working with the right team in the right way for you, this can actually be a very enjoyable, enriching experience. And oftentimes people, as they start to incorporate these elements, they're kind of living life more than they ever have before. And that's certainly within reach for you. So if you have any questions, we will send out some information. Our website is pacificbrainhealth.org. If you're interested in any of our lifestyle programs, I'll work with Allison to send an email to all of you regarding that. But this is my direct email, rglatt@pacificneuro.org. If you do email me, I'll try my best to get back to you, or one of my colleagues will, to tell you more about our lifestyle programs. And I also want to share a couple resources with you, which I'll work with Allison to send out. I do want to show one to all of you very quickly. And it's a free exercise resource called Age Bold that is free for 90 days for anyone that's within our center or in partnership with our center. And they have online exercise classes that are free, recorded. They have brain training, balance training, dance, Tai Chi, you name it. And so if you go to agebold.com/PBHC, which stands for Pacific Brain Health Center, you'll see this here, and you can just sign up for free for 90 days. And if you don't want to continue thereafter, you don't have to. If you do have United Healthcare insurance, it is covered, and they're working on getting other insurances to cover it. There are other solutions like Silver Sneakers, but this is just one I wanted to share with you guys. I'll place it in the chat, and I'll work with Allison to send this out as well. And I have about 10 minutes or so for questions and answers, and I appreciate everyone for their time.